Hey there, pirates. Welcome aboard the Anime No Me channel. If there's one thing that became crystal clear after everything we saw in Wano, it's that the world of the Straw Hats has changed forever. Not just because of the victory they achieved, but because for the first time, we got to see each of them pushed to their absolute limits, facing enemies that once seemed untouchable. Maybe now is the time when we can more accurately think about what a power ranking within the crew would look like, but always remembering that this is a work in progress. These levels are not set in stone because in One Piece, growth is organic, sometimes unpredictable. Even so, I think that after chapter 1057, when we see the conclusion of the Wano arc, it's hard to ignore that there are now distinct tiers among them. And today, we'll take a look at the updated Straw Hat power ranking. I hope for your support to help our crew win, and to do so, you just need to click the thumbs up button, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel. By doing this, you will win an incredible devil fruit, so just comment which fruit you want. Starting at the very top, it's obvious that Luffy is in a completely separate league. Not only because he awakened his Gear 5 in chapter 1044, becoming the user of the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, but because he literally crossed the barrier that separated the emperors from the other pirates. What we saw in his fight against Kaido in chapter 1049 wasn't just brute strength. It was the manifestation of absolute freedom, something that transcends mere technique. When Luffy smiles, even in the middle of a brutal fight, taking hits that would have made anyone else give up, he's not just resisting. He's imposing his will to live, to laugh, to be free. And Kaido, perhaps the most resilient being we've ever seen, recognized that. Not with words, but with actions. He fell and Luffy stayed standing. I think it has never been so clear that Luffy truly is the personification of freedom. And now, with Gear 5, his elasticity isn't just physical, it's symbolic. He bends reality itself. He turns lightning into toys. He smiles where no one else would even have the strength to stand. And that's not just physical endurance. It's pure willpower. And that places him in a power tier that very few in the world could ever hope to reach. Right below Luffy, I would place Zoro. But not the Zoro who used to face powerful enemies relying solely on technique. I'm talking about the Zoro who in chapter 1036 defeated King, Kaido's right-hand man, someone who until then seemed invincible. And what's even more impressive is that Zoro won while wielding Enma, a sword that demands not just strength, but complete mastery over one's own haki. Zoro had to conquer both King and Enma, a blade that is practically a living being, hungry for vital energy. And he did all this while carrying the burden of the promise he made to Luffy to protect his dreams. Perhaps even more striking is that during this battle, Zoro showed glimpses of Conqueror's haki, that rare and overwhelming force possessed only by the most determined and imposing. So I believe that Zoro is no longer just a swordsman. He's a monster in the purest sense of the word. In third place, Sanji. Maybe some would argue he should be tied with Zoro, but I still see a slight difference. Not because of a lack of strength, but because Sanji himself is still adjusting to what he has become. In chapter 1035, when he defeats Queen, his transformation becomes clear. The awakening of the genetic modifications made by Germa altered his body. Sanji is now someone who can regenerate, endure impacts that would have shattered him before, and generate enough heat to burn the air itself. And even so, he never lost who he is. He fought Queen without weapons, without resorting to poisons or cheap tricks. He fought as Sanji in his own way. Maybe over time, he'll reach a level equal to or even higher than Zoro's, but right now, I feel he's still in the process of fully embracing this new version of himself. After Sanji, I think it's fair to place Jinbe, the former Shichibukai who officially joined the crew during Wano in chapter 977. Jinbe is a battle veteran. He has fought admirals, survived Impel Down, navigated the most dangerous seas, and still kept his sense of honor intact. During Wano, in chapter 1018, he fought Who's Who, a former CP9 agent, no small opponent. And what's impressive is that Jinbe didn't win just with brute force, but with complete mastery over fishman karate and haki. Maybe the difference between him and Sanji or Zoro is versatility. Jinbe is an incredible fighter, but his greatest strength lies in defense and protection. He's the kind of shield you can trust to hold the front line when everything seems to be falling apart. Next, I believe Nico Robin deserves recognition. After everything we saw in chapter 1021, when she revealed her Demonio Fleur form, it's impossible to ignore that Robin has stepped beyond being just a support strategist. She has become a lethal fighter. She faced Black Maria alone, an opponent who combined physical strength and psychological traps, and emerged victorious not just through technique, but through a clear evolution of her power. And perhaps the most symbolic part is that her transformation into a demonic entity is the full acceptance of her past. Robin no longer fears being called a demon. She uses it to her advantage. And in One Piece, that's a far greater victory than simply winning a fight. Right after Robin, I think it makes sense to place Franky. The cyborg, who never stops upgrading himself, showed in chapter 1015, when he defeated Sasaki, that his brute force combined with technology is something very few can match. Franky might not have the refined haki the others do, but his endurance and firepower make up for it. He's like a walking fortress. And what's even more interesting is that Franky continues to blend genius with madness, creating weapons that border on the absurd, yet work when they're needed the most. After Franky, I would place Brook. Not because he's inherently weaker than Franky, but because his abilities are much more specific. In chapter 1030, we saw that Brook further evolved his soul-based techniques. He can fight spirits, freeze with a touch of his sword, and move through walls like a ghost. Brook is almost intangible in combat, which can be a massive advantage depending on the opponent. Maybe against purely physical foes, he would struggle more, but against enemies relying on spiritual or psychological powers, Brook is practically an unstoppable force. Next, I believe Nami deserves her spot. After Wano, especially following chapter 1016, when she fully masters Zeus as part of her climb attack, her power level jumped significantly. She still isn't a physical powerhouse, but her offensive capabilities are now enough to take down heavyweight opponents, controlling lightning with near-surgical precision. And what's even more impressive is that even with this new arsenal, Nami remains the crew's strategic mind when it comes to navigation. She may never be the strongest in direct combat, but on the battlefield, her intelligence and her ability to manipulate the weather can completely turn the tide of any fight. Then comes Usopp. I think Usopp is still that character who currently carries more potential than actual accomplishments. But he has evolved. In chapter 1014, we saw that he not only maintains his impeccable aim, but also started using his creativity to develop new techniques. Usopp is the type who, when least expected, pulls a card out of his sleeve. Maybe he still lacks the refined observation haki he dreams of having, but I believe that at the right moment, he will awaken it for good. Last but not least, we have Chopper. I believe that even after Wano, Chopper is still more of a support pillar than a frontline fighter. In chapter 1015, he manages to hold off Queen for a while, using his monster point form, which is already an impressive feat. But Chopper's true strength lies in his ability to heal, to keep allies alive, and to create vaccines amidst chaos. He is the heart of the crew, in both a literal and symbolic sense. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about all of this is that Chopper never stopped being that little reindeer who just wanted to be accepted. Now, he's an essential part of the family he found. Although Luffy is clearly on an entirely different level after awakening Gear 5, that doesn't mean the other crew members don't have even greater potential to evolve. Zoro, for example, demonstrated his strength by defeating King, but his journey is far from over. With each new challenge, he gets closer to reaching the peak of his swordsmanship. Sanji, with his genetic modifications, has already shown great evolution, but he's still adapting to his new form. Once he fully accepts this transformation, it's possible that his power could match or even surpass Zoro's. Jinbe is a true fortress, but his more defensive fighting style places him slightly below the more offensive members. However, his versatility and experience make him an important pillar in battle. Robin, after her fight against Black Maria, has become a lethal combatant. Her ability to manipulate shadows and her acceptance of her own history have made her a key piece of the crew. Franky, with his resilience and technological power, is essential to the team, but he still relies heavily on his inventions to deal with stronger enemies. His evolution continues through his ingenuity and physical strength. Brook, with his unique ability to manipulate souls, is a trump card against spiritual enemies, but his physical weakness still limits him in direct combat. However, his value goes far beyond physical strength. Nami, with Zeus now incorporated into her climb attack, has taken a huge leap in offensive power. Her intelligence and mastery over the weather make her a formidable strategic combatant. Usopp and Chopper, though their potential is still developing, play essential support roles. Usopp, with his creativity, and Chopper, with his healing abilities, continue to be indispensable to the crew. Each of the Straw Hats has a unique and vital role, and while Luffy is the leader, it's their collective strength that makes them an unbeatable crew. That was today's content. We hope you liked it and want to share your opinion on the subject. Don't forget to share the video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and stay amazing.